Now, there's some comments in the chat box that I think they're very valuable. The idea then is that as we think about different models and we investigate them, and as I said, I always put a lot more materials for you to look at in your independent time. The idea is that when you engage with these different models, if there are some that you think that might be more confusing than others, or that you have a personal preference, then the idea is that, you could take the decision to say, I'm not doing the health model that Nayeli wants us to experience. I am more interested in the ADDI model. But then you need to kind of persuade your group members to follow the steps of the ADDI model, so that then you could develop something out of it. Because week 12, we present your outline. Well, you present your outline with your group, and then you show us the material, or how this material would look like if you were actually putting it online. You need to tell us about the steps that you took in that presentation. So you might decide that, you want to do the ADDI model, or you want to do the Assure model, or follow the ABC. So if that's the case, if you don't want to do the model that I propose, the idea is that you're mostly working independently, because you are engaging with all these materials that I put there, which are very, very explicit. They take you through the different steps that you need to follow. I do highly suggest you to follow the health model, because this is a model that not only the university uses, but it is a model that incorporates a little bit of other models. So let's show you. Let me show you. So the health model, which is a combination of the Carpe Diem model, but also the ABC model, and it also combines Salmon's model of online learning. It has those elements that could enrich the reflective process and the thinking process. And I find that is one of the most complete models, because it does take you to these different stages. And as I said, it also incorporates storyboarding, and it makes you think really about online learning, because it also involves that model of Salmon, which is the 5-stage model of e-learning. And because we are doing online learning at the end of the day, this is why this model is relevant to us. So this model takes us through 5 stages. The first stage is developing aims and learning outcomes. Then the second stage is the storyboarding. Again, this is a process where you start creating, how does the unit would look like, how many modules, what kind of activities, but also it's asking you to think about how does these activities relate to the 5-stage model that Salmon proposes in online learning, to then asking you to develop the whole course. Now, in this unit, in this exercise, you're not going to develop the whole course. You only need to show us one example of an online learning material of how these would look like if you were to actually, publish this material online. So how would it look like? And for that, we just need one tiny example. So simplifying the whole process by just focusing on one element, one thing, to then, when you present your online course outline and then your learning material, the idea is that we give each other feedback. That's when we go into the reality check session. To then, obviously, the evaluation is difficult to achieve, because we would need to actually implement the whole thing to get that feedback and then evaluate. So And that's reality for any other models. We will never get to the evaluation bit because that's not the purpose. The idea is that just designing without implementing or evaluating. The idea is that we're just in that stage of aims, outcomes, storyboarding, and online development. So we just follow 3 stages. We do get to the reality check, but again, we won't get to evaluate things because we need to implement the actual thing. So there you go. Those are the steps that we will follow during the next following 4 weeks. The idea then is that the health model also draws on Bloom's taxonomy. Is anyone familiar with Bloom's taxonomy?
Sure, I guess everybody.
Excellent. We need to have this in mind because, as we know, Bloom's taxonomy involves different levels. So we have the remembering level, the understanding, applying, evaluating, analyzing, evaluating, and then the creating stage. Now, this is more linear, but if you do a really quick search online, most of you might be more familiar with this kind of diagram that shows us, this is a triangle that shows us the different levels of cognitive levels or cognitive domains. If I click on images, we have various interpretations of Bloom's taxonomy. You will see that sometimes the stage of remembering is not called remembering, it's called knowledge, which is fine. People have different interpretations of different people's work. But the idea is that, if I click on this one, so if you ask your students to do more complicated things that are, in this case, are higher order skills. So if you're asking students to create something or to evaluate, to analyze, which is something we ask students in higher education to do, to be more critical, to create, to analyze, to evaluate, and to produce knowledge. That's because we're asking you to operationalize your higher order skills. But if you're asking people just to memorize things, identify things, match, relate, that is considered like lower level skills, where people are just in that process of understanding or remembering things. And that's what the Bloom's taxonomy is all about. It gives you a classification of different actions. There you go. So higher order skills we can include from analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And lower order skills we have remembering, understanding, and sometimes applying. I think applying is in between the two. Now, in reality, when we are in a classroom, students are going back and forward. Yeah, they're not just doing one high order skill or low skill. Sometimes there's a combination of these different skills implemented in one activity. But the idea is that we draw on Bloom's taxonomy, more specifically on the different verbs or actions that are located in each level. So the remembering level, which is the knowledge level in the triangle that you've seen before, which is the basic level, we have different verbs such as copying, defining, finding, locating, quoting, listening, Googling, repeating, retrieving, and so on. So those are simple actions. Now, if we want students to understand things, we say that the actions at that level required them to interpret, to comment, to predict, to relate, to summarize, and so on and so forth. You have more examples. Other actions that are involved in the application stage, which is this one in green. So when students have specific knowledge, we can ask them to put it into practice, such as You might ask people to do a role play, to articulate, to display something that they know in a certain specific way, to experiment as well. So they're putting things into practice. So what we're doing in the following 4 weeks, you're applying your knowledge of online design and online theories to create an online course. So we're applying, but you're also requested to analyze, because you need to look at the potentials and the challenges of particular technologies to make decisions. And to evaluate, at the end of the day, you need to experiment, you need to create, you need to create an online material and present it to us. So you're doing more complicated things. So if you look at each of the levels, each level has different actions. And those actions are important in the process of thinking about learning outcomes. Why? Because they usually tell us what people can do at different levels. And we will see some examples. I'll give you an example in a minute. I'm gonna jump this one. Sorry. I'll get back to this bit later. Hold on. Because we need to think about learning outcomes. Hold on. I think. Yeah. So if you ever see LOS, that refers to learning outcomes. I'm just gonna write it down there as a note for us to remember. So just remember, Bloom's taxonomy relates to the stage of creating learning outcomes. Now, one more model I found online that is important at every stage is the universal design for learning. Have you heard of this one? Yeah, okay, I can see some people nodding. Now, I'm gonna play a video just to show you what we mean by universal design. Oh, sorry. I will need to stop sharing and share again because I need to share my audio. There you go.
Is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal design for learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in a classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have 3 broad networks. One for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all 3. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, What barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways, allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways, and offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information on UDL, go to www.cast.org.
There you go. So mainly the idea is that, that you are thinking about not only what activities you're going to be doing, but when you get to think about the different digital tools that you're going to use, you take into consideration those 3 principles of engagement, representation, and action. And now these principles, I would say, from my experience, are usually represented in the model, Salmon's model, but you do need to make those questions. You need to self-reflect whether your materials that you're creating will be accessed by different students with different, interests in the learning process. And that's why these 3 principles are important. When you think about how you represent information, are you showing people, if you're using a video, does your video have captions? If you're showing specific materials, such as, when you're putting information in Canvas, are you using graphs? Are you using videos? Are you using any kind of supportive elements that will enrich the content so that students engage with it? That's when we talk about engagement. And then what actions and how students are engaging. So the 3 questions that you need to ask yourself is what your students are learning, how they're learning, and why. So satisfying all these 3 questions is important in all of the models, regardless of the model you use, ADDIE, Assure, Carpe Diem, Hell model. I think these questions should always be part of the, conversation. We're going to move most of the content that you will see that I'm going to skip. We're going to check next week. So don't worry about it. I'm just going to jump into what we need to do today. And we need to talk about your online course and start thinking about learning outcomes. So just a recap of what you want to do, or we're asking you to do for the following 4 weeks. The idea is that you think about an online course. You're doing this in groups, your assignment groups. You think about a name for that course unit, and then you start thinking about the outline. What do we mean by outline? I'm just going to make my screen bigger. So look at this example on your screen. What we mean by outline. So you have a title for your course unit, and then you need to think about how many modules your unit, course unit will have. So you can always refer back to how we have organized TLO. So the name of our unit is Teaching and Learning Online. You could use any topic. It doesn't matter if it's simple or complex. You just choose one topic. Think about how many modules. What are the learning outcomes of each module? So if you remember, every time we start with a different module, we do tell you the learning outcomes. And that's how I started today, this session, by telling you the learning outcomes. You can also think about how many weeks will be involved in each module. Usually for TLO, we have 1 week for each module, except the first module that covered 2 weeks. But that was because we were introducing the units and so on and so forth. But you could decide to have different weeks for each module. You don't have to go by one. That's up to you. Remember, you need to think about what do you want your students to be able to do and how you will break down the process. These are the things that you're going to be thinking when I send you to your breakout room. The other thing to think about is that you will be asked to develop a learning material. But as I said, a learning material could be either a video, a Google slide, a podcast, a Padlet, an infographic. So it's very, very representative of one thing. So for that, we will ask you to focus on one module of your course unit. You don't have to do this for every module, just focus on one module. And focus on, if your module covers 1 week, for example, module 1, you take module 1, you take week 1, and you want to show us how the first week materials would look like. You just choose one bit of that week, and then that's when you can develop either a blog or a video or a PDF or whatever. You choose. You have options here to develop, even if it's just a survey, something that you want to show us how you will present your materials. More specifically, what online digital tools you're using. And that's it. That's all you need to do. And where we start is in the developing of learning outcomes. But before we think about learning outcomes, I want you to brainstorm what kind of course you want to do and agree, with your group members, the kind of online course you want to do. That could be sometimes a very difficult decision to make, but you could start. You've already have written an assignment. I'm assuming. I'll tell you all about the assignment before we leave. So you could transform your assignment, your collaborative assignment, in a module, in an online course, for instance. So what we're going to do then, because I'm just looking at time, is that in the next 10 minutes, discuss, brainstorm what would be the name of your online course.